My brother's wedding planner called. "Your family canceled your invitation but asked to keep the $65,000 deposit you paid." I said, "Cancel the entire wedding." She gasped. "But sir, you're not the bride." "No, but I own the venue, the catering company, and the hotel chain they booked for guests. I am Natalie Warren, 34 years old, owner of Sapphire Luxury Hotels and Elite Catering. My brother James and I have always been close, surviving our parents' divorce and building our lives together. When he got engaged, I happily put down $65,000 as a deposit for his dream wedding at my finest venue. Then last week, his wedding planner called with news that shattered my heart. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are from, hit that like and subscribe button, and stay for a wedding disaster that taught me the true meaning of family and self-respect. James and I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Boston. He was only 2 years older than me, but he always took his role as big brother seriously. I remember how he would walk me to school every day, holding my hand at crosswalks and making sure the other kids never bullied me. We had that special sibling bond that some people never experience in their lifetime. Our childhood took a sharp turn when our parents divorced. I was 12 and James was 14. The split was messy, full of late-night arguments and slammed doors. Our father Robert was a workaholic accountant who rarely made time for family dinners. Our mother Linda felt neglected and eventually found companionship elsewhere. Neither of them realized how their separation would impact us. After the divorce was finalized, our parents settled into a Cold War. They communicated only when absolutely necessary, using us as messengers. "Tell your father he is late on the child support again," or "Ask your mother if I can pick you up an hour earlier on Sunday." James and I quickly learned to rely on each other instead of our distracted parents. The financial situation at home became strained. Mom had been a stay-at-home parent and suddenly needed to find work with outdated skills. Dad moved into a small apartment and seemed more interested in his new girlfriend than paying bills on time. By the time I was 16, I was working after school at a local diner. James took a job stocking shelves at the grocery store. We would pool our earnings to buy groceries when Mom was short on cash. "We only have each other," Nat James would tell me as we counted coins on our bedroom floor. "No matter what happens, I will always have your back." That promise carried us through high school and beyond. When I decided to pursue hospitality management in college, James was my biggest cheerleader. He had opted to skip college and went straight into construction, working his way up from apprentice to foreman by the time he was 23. He would send me a portion of his paycheck each month to help with my textbooks and living expenses. My career path was challenging but rewarding. I started as a front desk agent at a boutique hotel while finishing my degree. The manager noticed my dedication and promoted me to supervisor within a year. By 27, I had worked my way up to director of operations at one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. That was when I took my biggest risk. With my savings and a small business loan, I purchased a struggling historic hotel that was on the verge of foreclosure. The Sapphire Grand had gorgeous architecture but terrible management. I worked 18-hour days for 2 years straight, renovating the property and rebuilding its reputation. James was there every step of the way. He used his construction connections to help me find reliable contractors at fair prices. On weekends, he would come by with his crew to handle small projects free of charge. "Consider it an investment in our future," he would say, with a wink. The Sapphire Grand became profitable in its 3rd year under my ownership. I used that success to secure funding for a second location, then a third. By the time I turned 30, I had 5 luxury hotels in my portfolio, and had launched Elite Catering, a high-end food service company that specialized in weddings and corporate events. Throughout my entrepreneurial journey, James remained my rock. He celebrated each milestone and consoled me through every setback. When a pipe burst at the Sapphire Boston location, causing thousands in water damage, James drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to help supervise the emergency repairs. Our parents took notice of our success, but in different ways. Dad suddenly wanted to reconnect, inviting us to dinner at expensive restaurants and introducing us to his business associates. Mom became oddly competitive, comparing her modest achievements to our lucky breaks. Neither of them acknowledged that their children had succeeded despite their absence, not because of their support. Then Melissa Blake entered the picture. James met her at a charity golf tournament where my catering company was providing the lunch service. She was beautiful, polished, and came from old money. Her father owned a chain of car dealerships across the Northeast, and her mother was on the board of several prestigious cultural foundations. From the beginning, something felt off about Melissa. She spoke to the catering staff with a dismissive tone that made me uncomfortable. When James introduced us, her smile did not reach her eyes. "Oh, you are the little sister who works in hotels. How quaint," she said, looking around as if searching for someone more important to talk to. James was completely smitten. Within weeks, he was spending all his free time with Melissa. She introduced him to her country club friends, and took him to exclusive restaurants where the waitstaff treated him like an outsider. Gradually, I noticed changes in my brother. He started using phrases like "the right people" and "our kind of establishment." He traded his reliable pickup truck for a luxury SUV he could barely afford. Our weekly sibling dinners became monthly, then rare, occurrences. When we did get together, Melissa usually accompanied him, checking her watch and sighing loudly when our conversations drifted to childhood memories or inside jokes she could not participate in. Melissa and her mother Eleanor made no secret of their disdain for me. At a dinner celebrating James's birthday, Eleanor asked pointed questions about my little hotel business, and seemed disappointed when I explained the scale of my operations. "Well, I suppose anyone can succeed in America these days," she said with a tight smile. "Though there is a difference between new money and established families." Melissa nodded in agreement. "It must be exhausting working in service. All those complaints and dirty rooms." She shuddered delicately. "I could never." I tried to explain that as the owner I rarely cleaned rooms myself anymore, but James interrupted. "Natalie has always been a hard worker," he said, as if apologizing for my character trait. "She will probably sell the business once she settles down and starts a family." The comment stung. James knew how passionate I was about my career. I had never expressed any desire to settle down or sell my companies. In that moment, I realized how far he had drifted from the brother who once knew me better than anyone. Despite the growing distance, I still loved James fiercely. I told myself that his behavior was a phase, that he was just trying to fit into Melissa's world. Surely the brother who had held my hand at crosswalks was still in there somewhere. On a crisp autumn evening, James called me with excitement in his voice. She said, "Yes, Nat." Melissa agreed to marry me. His happiness was contagious, and I found myself genuinely thrilled for him, despite my reservations about his fiancée. "That is wonderful news, James. Tell me everything. How did you propose?" I curled up on my sofa, ready to hear the romantic details. James launched into the story of his elaborate proposal at the Blake family's summer home in the Hamptons. He had arranged for a private chef's string quartet and thousands of rose petals scattered across the beach. The ring was a 4-carat diamond that had cost him nearly 6 months of savings. "It sounds perfect," I said, ignoring the knot in my stomach. The extravagance seemed unlike the practical brother I had grown up with. "Have you set a date yet?" "Melissa wants a June wedding. Her mother says the best venues book up a year in advance, so we need to start planning immediately." He paused. "There is just one problem. The places Eleanor suggested are either already booked or way beyond our budget." I could hear the stress in his voice. James made a good living as a construction manager, but the Blakes lived in a different financial stratosphere. I knew he was worried about measuring up to their expectations. "What about the Sapphire Grand?" I suggested. "The ballroom can hold 300 guests, and the gardens would be beautiful for a June ceremony." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I do not know, Nat. Melissa has her heart set on the Rosewood or the Peninsula. The Sapphire Grand was just rated above both in Luxury Travel magazine," I pointed out. "And as the owner's brother, you would get preferential booking and significant discounts." After more hesitation, James promised to discuss it with Melissa. 3 days later, he called back. "Melissa will consider the Sapphire Grand, but she wants to see it first, and she is concerned about the catering. Her mother knows several celebrity chefs. Tell her Elite Catering can create any menu she desires," I said, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. "We have 2 Michelin-trained chefs on staff." The tour of the Sapphire Grand was tense. Melissa and Eleanor walked through the grand ballroom with critical eyes, whispering to each other and taking notes. My hotel manager, Anthony, presented our most luxurious wedding package, while I showed them the bridal suite with its panoramic city views. "The space is adequate," Eleanor conceded reluctantly, "but the color scheme is all wrong for Melissa's vision." Would you be willing to reupholster the ballroom chairs and replace the draperies? I blinked in surprise. We could certainly add chair covers and decorative elements to match your color palette, I offered. Complete reupholstery of 200 chairs would be quite costly and unnecessary. Melissa pursed her lips. Mother, perhaps we should continue looking at the rosewood. James shot me a pleading look. I recognized that expression from our childhood when he needed me to compromise to keep the peace. With a deep breath, I smiled at my future sister-in-law. Why don't you show me your Pinterest board? I am sure we can find creative solutions to transform the space into exactly what you are envisioning. That concession opened the floodgates. Over the next hour, Melissa detailed her dream wedding, which seemed to have been lifted straight from a royal ceremony. She wanted imported flowers, custom lighting installations, a champagne fountain, and a 10-tier cake. When Anthony discreetly provided a preliminary estimate, James went pale. Even with my owner's discount, the wedding would cost well over $100,000. That was when I made a decision that would change everything. As my gift to you both, I said I would like to cover the venue and catering deposit. $65,000 toward your special day. James's eyes widened. Nat, that is too generous, we cannot accept that. But Melissa and Eleanor exchanged glances. That would be lovely, Melissa said quickly. We accept your generous offer. Even for a successful business owner like myself, $65,000 was a significant amount. It represented the profit from several months of operations. But I told myself it was worth it to support my brother, and perhaps build a bridge with my new extended family. The planning process began immediately. Melissa hired Victoria Hayes, one of the city's most exclusive wedding planners, to coordinate the details. I expected to be included in the major decisions given my financial contribution and ownership of the venue, but I quickly discovered I was mistaken. Melissa scheduled tastings with my catering team without inviting me. Victoria sent emails about architectural changes to the ballroom, without copying me on the correspondence. When I asked James about being excluded, he seemed uncomfortable. Melissa just wants to make sure everything is perfect, he explained. She feels there might be a conflict of interest if you are too involved, since it is your business. I swallowed my hurt feelings and tried to respect their process. However, the situation became increasingly difficult as Melissa and Eleanor made demanding and often unreasonable requests. They insisted that my staff remove a historic chandelier from the ballroom because it did not match Melissa's color scheme. They demanded that the kitchen create 15 different sample menus before making a selection. They scheduled appointments with my already overworked venue coordinator at odd hours, often canceling at the last minute. Through it all, I maintained my professionalism. I wanted this wedding to be perfect for James, even if it meant tolerating Melissa's bridezilla behavior. My staff loyal to me did their best to accommodate the endless demands, though I could see the strain in their faces. You are a saint, Anthony told me, after a particularly difficult meeting with Eleanor. If she were not your future family, I would have shown her the door weeks ago. The $65,000 deposit was officially processed 6 months before the wedding date. I signed the paperwork myself, specifying that it covered the venue rental, basic catering package, and hotel rooms for the wedding party. Additional costs for upgrades, special requests, and guest accommodations would be billed separately. As the wedding date approached, I expected to receive my formal invitation. When the 3-month mark passed with no envelope in my mailbox, I casually mentioned it to James during one of our increasingly rare phone conversations. Oh, the invitations went out last week, he said vaguely. Melissa handled the guest list. I am sure yours is on the way. Another month passed. No invitation arrived. I told myself there must have been a mix-up with the mail, or that perhaps they assumed I did not need a formal invitation, since I was so closely involved with the venue. Still, a sense of unease began to grow in the pit of my stomach. The first truly alarming sign came when my cousin Dana called to thank me for her invitation to James's wedding. The invitation is gorgeous, she gushed. That gold foil embossing must have cost a fortune, and the handwritten note from Melissa was such a nice touch. My heart sank. I had received neither an invitation nor a handwritten note. When I checked with other family members, I discovered they had all received their invitations weeks ago. That evening, I called James directly. Is there something I should know about the wedding, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Everyone else seems to have received their invitations. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Melissa has been handling the guest list, he said finally. I will check with her and get back to you. 3 days later, I still had not heard from him. I decided to take a more direct approach and texted him. Need to finalize my attendance details for your wedding? Should I bring a +1? What color dress would coordinate with the wedding party? His response was vague and evasive. Still working out some details. Will let you know soon. Around the same time, I noticed other concerning patterns. The bridal shower had apparently happened the previous weekend, but I had not been invited. Photos appeared on social media showing James, Melissa, and both families at what looked like an engagement photo shoot in the botanical gardens. Again, I had not been included, or even informed. During a routine check-in with my hotel staff about the wedding arrangements, I learned that Melissa had requested a meeting to review the seating chart for the reception. Curious, I asked to see a copy. My name was nowhere to be found. There must be a mistake, I told my events coordinator. I am the groom's sister. She looked uncomfortable. Miss Blake was very specific about the seating arrangements. She personally reviewed each name multiple times. The situation came to a head when our parents organized a family dinner 1 month before the wedding. It was the first time in years that both my mother and father would be in the same room, a testament to the significance of James's marriage. The dinner was held at an upscale restaurant downtown with James, Melissa, both sets of parents, and me in attendance. From the moment we sat down, the tension was palpable. Melissa kept whispering to her mother and shooting glances in my direction. When the conversation turned to wedding details, they spoke in vague terms, changing the subject whenever I asked specific questions. During the main course, Eleanor made a comment that sent a chill down my spine. It is so important to have the right atmosphere at a wedding, she said, swirling her wine glass. The proper guests, the right connections. A wedding is not just a celebration. It is a statement about your place in society. Melissa nodded in agreement. Some people simply do not understand the social implications of a high-profile event, she added, looking directly at me. Running hotels is one thing, but appreciating true elegance is quite another. My father, never particularly perceptive about social dynamics, laughed uncomfortably. Natalie understands elegance just fine. Her hotels are top-rated in the luxury category. Eleanor's smile did not reach her eyes. Yes, but there is a difference between serving the elite and being one of them. Is there not? The implication was clear. In their eyes, I was the help, not a social equal. I looked at James, expecting him to defend me, but he was studying his plate, intently avoiding eye contact. My mother, perhaps sensing my distress, attempted to change the subject. Natalie has been so generous with her contribution to the wedding. The venue looks absolutely stunning. Melissa's response was swift and cutting. Yes, the financial arrangement has been helpful, though we have had to make substantial upgrades to bring the space up to standard. I felt as if I had been slapped. My flagship hotel, the jewel of my business empire, was being described as substandard by a woman who had never worked a day in her life. The Sapphire Grand is a 5-star establishment, I said evenly. We host diplomats, celebrities, and yes, society weddings on a regular basis. Of course you do, dear Eleanor, patted my hand condescendingly. And we appreciate your establishment's effort to accommodate our vision. After dinner, I tried to speak with James privately, but Melissa intercepted us. James, darling, we need to discuss the rehearsal dinner with Daddy, she said, pulling him away. The look she gave me was triumphant, almost smug. Later that week, I received a disturbing message from a friend who worked at the country club where Melissa was a member. She had overheard Melissa laughing with her bridesmaids about the hotel girl, who thought she was invited to the wedding. She actually thinks she will be sitting at the family table, Melissa had reportedly said. As if we would want someone like her front and center in the photos. But we need to keep her happy until the big day, since she controls the venue. Another bridesmaid had asked, what about the money she contributed? $65,000 is a lot to take without including her. Melissa's response chilled me. That money is already spent. What is she going to do? Ask for it back? Besides, James says she is loaded, she will get over it. I confronted James that evening, calling him and demanding answers. Am I invited to your wedding or not? I asked bluntly. Because from what I am hearing, Melissa has other ideas. James sighed heavily. Nat, it is complicated. Melissa and her mother have very specific ideas about the guest list. They are concerned about maintaining a certain atmosphere. An atmosphere that does not include your only sister. The sister who gave you $65,000 toward this wedding. My voice cracked with emotion. You do not understand the pressure I am under, James said defensively. Melissa's family moves in important circles. This wedding could open doors for both of us. Since when do you care about important circles? I demanded. What happened to the brother who used to say we only needed each other? People grow up, Natalie. They change. Maybe you should try it sometime, instead of holding on to the past. His words were like daggers to my heart. Is that Melissa talking or you? I asked quietly. This conversation is not productive, he said, his voice cold. I need to go. Melissa and I have an appointment with the florist. As I hung up the phone, I felt a deep sense of loss. The brother I had known and loved my entire life was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Still, I clung to the hope that this was temporary madness, that the real James would return once the wedding stress had passed. I decided to make one last attempt to salvage our relationship. I sent James a heartfelt email reminding him of all we had been through together and expressing my hurt at being excluded from his important day. I assured him that I would continue to ensure the wedding venue and catering were perfect, regardless of my personal feelings, because that was what family did for each other. His response was brief and formal. Thank you for your understanding. I will speak with Melissa about the guest list situation. Days passed with no further communication. The wedding was now just 1 week away, and I had begun to accept that I might not be attending my own brother's ceremony, despite providing the venue and a substantial financial contribution. Then came the phone call that would change everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. I was in the middle of a budget meeting with my executive team, but decided to answer in case it was related to the wedding. Hello? Is this Natalie Warren? A professional female voice inquired. Yes, speaking, I replied, stepping out of the conference room. This is Victoria Hayes, the wedding planner for the Warren Blake ceremony, scheduled at the Sapphire Grand next Saturday. Her tone was crisp and businesslike. I am calling regarding your deposit payment of $65,000. My heart skipped a beat. Yes, is there an issue with the payment? I had processed it myself months ago, but perhaps there was some administrative problem. Not exactly, Victoria hesitated. I have been instructed by the family to inform you that your invitation to the wedding has been cancelled. However, they would like to retain the deposit you provided. The world seemed to stop. I gripped the hallway wall for support. Excuse me, Victoria cleared her throat uncomfortably. The family has decided to revise the guest list. Your attendance is no longer required. However, they wish to keep the venue and catering arrangements as planned, utilizing the deposit you already paid. Which family? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Who exactly made this decision? Ms. Blake and her mother provided the instruction, Victoria replied. I was told that Mr. Warren is aware and has agreed to the arrangement. James had agreed to uninvite me from his wedding but keep my $65,000, my own brother. The same brother who once gave me half his sandwich every day at school because he knew I was too shy to ask for more food. The brother who held my hand at our grandmother's funeral and promised we would always have each other. May I ask why I managed fighting to keep my voice steady? Victoria paused again, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. I was informed that your presence might distract from the event's intended atmosphere. Ms. Blake felt that the family dynamics might create tension on her special day. Family dynamics, I repeated incredulously. I am his sister, his only sibling. Ms. Blake also mentioned something about your professional connection to the venue, potentially confusing guests about your role. Victoria sounded like she was reading from a script. She specifically mentioned concerns about you being perceived as staff rather than family, given your ownership of the establishment. The cruelty of the statement knocked the wind out of me. After years of hard work building my business from nothing, my success was being used against me. I was too associated with service industry work to be worthy of attending my brother's wedding. Did James say this? I asked, needing to know if these were his words or Melissa's. I have not spoken directly with Mr. Warren about this matter, Victoria admitted. The instruction came from Ms. Blake, but she assured me that Mr. Warren was in agreement. I closed my eyes trying to process the betrayal. And the $65,000 I contributed, they expect to keep that money while excluding me from the event. Yes, Victoria confirmed, sounding increasingly uncomfortable. The deposit is considered non-refundable at this point as stated in the contract. Ms. Blake mentioned that you had presented it as a gift not contingent on your attendance. A wave of anger washed over me, clearing away the shock and hurt. This was beyond inconsiderate. It was calculating and cruel. They had used me for my venue, my catering services, and my money, all while planning to exclude me from the actual celebration. Ms. Warren, are you still there? Victoria asked after a long silence. Yes, I said, my voice suddenly calm and clear. I want to confirm that I understand correctly. The bride and her mother have decided I am not welcome at my brother's wedding, despite my significant financial contribution, and the fact that the event is being held at my property, and my brother has apparently agreed to this arrangement. That is my understanding, yes, Victoria replied cautiously. I took a deep breath. Victoria, I appreciate your calling me directly. I am guessing you did not know that I am the owner of the Sapphire Grand and Elite Catering. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. No, I was not aware of that connection. Ms. Blake introduced you only as Mr. Warren's sister, who had contributed to the wedding fund. I see, I said, a plan already forming in my mind. In that case, I have a message I would like you to deliver to Miss Blake and my brother. Of course, Victoria replied, her professional demeanor slipping as she realized the precarious position she was in. Please tell them that I said to cancel the entire wedding. Victoria gasped. But Ms. Warren, you cannot. You are not the bride or groom. You do not have the authority to cancel the event. No, I agreed. But I own the venue, the catering company, and the hotel chain they booked for out-of-town guests. And according to Section 12 of the contract they signed, I reserve the right to cancel any event that violates our company's core values, which include respect and integrity. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. But the deposits, the guests, everything is arranged, Victoria stammered. Yes, it is unfortunate timing, I said coolly. Please inform Miss Blake and my brother that unless I receive a formal apology and invitation to the wedding by 5 p.m. today, the Sapphire Grand will no longer be available for their event. All deposits will be forfeited as per the cancellation policy they agreed to. This is highly irregular, Victoria protested. I have never encountered such a situation in my career. Neither have I admitted. But then, I have never been uninvited for my brother's wedding while being expected to fund it either. Please deliver my message promptly. I ended the call and leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. Part of me could not believe what I had just done. Another part knew it was long overdue. For too long I had allowed Melissa and her family to treat me with disrespect, while I smiled and accommodated their demands. For too long I had watched my brother transform into someone I barely recognized. The time for passivity was over. If James wanted to choose Melissa's elitist values over our lifelong bond, that was his right, but he would not do it in my venue with my money while excluding me from the celebration. Within minutes, my phone began to ring. It was James. I let it go to voicemail, then Melissa called, then Eleanor. I ignored them all, returning to my budget meeting with a serene smile that confused my executive team. Is everything all right? Anthony asked, noticing my changed demeanor. Actually, yes, I replied. I think everything is finally becoming very clear. By 4:30 that afternoon, my office, phone, cell phone, and email were flooded with messages. Victoria had apparently delivered my ultimatum, unleashing a storm of panic. The wedding was only 10 days away. Over 200 guests had confirmed their attendance. Deposits had been paid to florists, photographers, and entertainers. At precisely 4:55, there was a commotion in the hotel lobby. James had arrived with Melissa and both sets of parents in tow. It was time to face the consequences of my stand. I instructed my assistant to escort the wedding party to my private conference room rather than my office. This was no longer a family matter, but a business dispute, and I wanted the setting to reflect that distinction. When I entered the room 5 minutes later, the tension was palpable. Melissa was red-faced and teary, clutching her mother's hand. Eleanor looked apoplectic, her lips pressed into a thin line. My parents appeared confused and distressed. And James, my beloved brother, looked like a stranger, his face a mask of anger and embarrassment. What the hell do you think you are doing? He demanded, as soon as I closed the door behind me. I remained standing, hands clasped in front of me, and forcing the terms of our contract, I replied calmly, and standing up for myself finally. Melissa's father, Howard Blake, stepped forward. He was a large man accustomed to intimidating others with his physical presence. This is outrageous. We have a binding agreement. You cannot simply cancel a wedding with 10 days' notice. I met his gaze steadily. Actually, I can. Section 12 of the venue contract clearly states that the Sapphire Grand reserves the right to cancel any event that violates our ethical standards or poses a reputational risk to our establishment. Ethical standards, Eleanor scoffed. What nonsense is this? Attempting to exclude the venue owner from an event while retaining her financial contribution constitutes fraud, I stated. That violates both ethical standards and potentially the law. We did not exclude you, Melissa, protested, tears streaming down her face. We simply revised the guest list. By removing only me, I pointed out. After accepting my $65,000 contribution, my mother stepped forward, clearly confused. Natalie, what is going on? Why would you not be invited to your own brother's wedding? I looked at James, giving him the opportunity to explain. He avoided my gaze, staring at the carpet. Perhaps James or Melissa would like to explain their reasoning, I suggested, after the silence stretched uncomfortably. This is a misunderstanding, James finally said, his voice lacking conviction. Victoria must have confused the instructions. Victoria Hayes, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, straightened her spine. I followed Miss Blake's instructions exactly as they were given to me. I was told to inform Miss Warren that her invitation had been rescinded, but that the deposit would be retained. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. This is ridiculous. So there was a miscommunication about the guest list. It happens with large events. That is no reason to threaten the entire wedding. This was not a miscommunication, I said firmly. This was a deliberate decision to exclude me while keeping my money. You offered that money as a gift, Melissa snapped, dropping all pretense of civility. Gifts do not come with conditions. Actually, they often do, I countered. Especially when the gift is a business transaction with a signed contract. Howard Blake pulled out his cell phone. This is absurd. I am calling our attorney right now. We will sue you for breach of contract. You are welcome to do that, I replied. But the contract is quite clear about my right to cancel under these circumstances. Additionally, I have documentary evidence of the bride's intent to defraud me by accepting my financial contribution while planning to exclude me from the event. That is a serious accusation, Howard growled. Yes, it is, I agreed. Almost as serious as telling your daughter it is acceptable to take $65,000 from someone and then ban them from the event they funded. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. James, is this true? Did you agree to exclude your sister from your wedding? James looked trapped, his eyes darting between Melissa and me. It is complicated, he muttered. It is actually quite simple, I said, feeling a strange calm despite the chaos. Either I am welcome at my brother's wedding as a full and respected family member, or there will be no wedding at the Sapphire Grand. Melissa burst into fresh tears. You cannot do this. Everything is arranged. Our guests are arriving from Europe next week. The custom gown, the flowers, the band that required a 6-month deposit. I understand. It is inconvenient, I acknowledged. But so is discovering that your only sibling has decided you are not good enough to attend his wedding despite your generous contribution. Eleanor turned to James. This is ridiculous. Call her bluff. We can find another venue. I smiled thinly. With 10 days' notice in the height of wedding season, that seems unlikely. But you are welcome to try. Of course, you would forfeit the deposit here, and most other venues will require full payment up front for such a last-minute booking. The color drained from Melissa's face as she realized the impossibility of the situation. Daddy, do something. Howard Blake looked thoughtful. Perhaps we can come to some arrangement. What exactly do you want, Miss Warren? Respect, I said simply. A sincere apology and acknowledgement that what you planned to do was wrong, and a guarantee that I will be treated as the family that I am at this event. This is extortion, Eleanor hissed. No, I corrected her. This is a boundary. I have spent months accommodating every demand, absorbing every slight, and financing a significant portion of this wedding. In return, I have been treated with contempt and ultimately excluded entirely. That ends today. My mother moved to stand beside me, surprising everyone, including myself, I agree with Natalie. What you were planning is shameful, James. I raised you better than this. James finally looked up, his expression a mix of shame and defiance. You do not understand the pressure I have been under. I understand perfectly, I replied. You have been so desperate to impress Melissa and her family that you were willing to betray the sister who has always been there for you, the sister who helped put you through trade school, who celebrated every success and supported you through every failure. Something in my words seemed to penetrate the fog he had been living in. For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of the real James in his eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, Nat, he said quietly. Yet you were willing to ban me from your wedding while keeping my money. I pointed out. How did you think that would make me feel? I thought. He hesitated. I thought you would understand that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the bigger picture. And I was the sacrifice, I asked, my voice breaking slightly, despite my resolve to remain composed. James had no answer for that. Howard Blake cleared his throat. Let us be practical about this. Miss Warren, if we agree to include you in the wedding as requested, will you allow the event to proceed as planned? That depends, I said, turning to face James directly. Is that what you want, James? Am I just an obligation to be tolerated, or do you actually want your only sister at your wedding? The room fell silent as everyone waited for James's response. This was the moment of truth, not just for the wedding, but for our relationship going forward. James looked at Melissa, then at me, then down at his hands. I want you there, Nat, he said finally. I always did. I just got caught up in everything. The planning, the expectations, the pressure to make everything perfect. Perfect for whom, I asked softly. He had no answer for that either. Melissa stomped her foot in frustration. This is my wedding, I should decide who attends. It is our wedding, James corrected her, seeming to find his voice at last. And Natalie is my sister. She should be there. She deserves to be there. The look Melissa gave him was venomous. After this stunt, you still want her there. She just threatened to ruin our entire wedding. After you tried to exclude her while keeping her money, James countered, standing a little straighter. Think about that, Melissa. How would you feel if someone did that to you? For perhaps the first time since I had met her, Melissa seemed genuinely speechless. Here is what is going to happen, I said, addressing the entire room. I will allow the wedding to proceed as planned with the following conditions. First, I will receive a formal written apology from the bride and groom for the attempt to exclude me. Second, I will be treated with the respect due to a family member and business owner throughout all wedding events. Third, my $65,000 contribution will be acknowledged in the wedding program as a gift from a loving sister, not simply as a venue discount. Howard Blake nodded thoughtfully. Those terms seem reasonable given the circumstances. Father Melissa protested. Enough, Melissa, he said firmly. Miss Warren has us over a barrel and you know it. More importantly, she is right. What you and your mother planned was inappropriate and potentially illegal. We are fortunate she is willing to work with us at all. Eleanor looked as if she had swallowed something sour but remained silent. My parents exchanged glances, clearly processing the family drama they had walked into. Do we have an agreement? I asked, looking directly at James. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Yes. And Nat, I am sorry. I should have never let things get this far. It was a start, but I knew we had a long way to go to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Still, for the first time in months, I felt like I might eventually get my brother back. Then the wedding will proceed as scheduled, I said, opening the conference room door to signal that our meeting was concluded. Victoria will coordinate with my staff on the final details. As the group filed out, James lingered behind. When we were alone, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. I really am sorry, Nat. I do not know who I have become these past few months. Neither do I said honestly. But I hope you figure it out before you say I do. Marriage is hard enough when you are being true to yourself. He nodded slowly, seeming to really hear me for the first time in months. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. That is what family does, I replied. The real kind, not the kind that only values status and appearances. As he left to join his waiting fiancée, I wondered whether the wedding would actually take place. And if it did, what kind of marriage would follow? Only time would tell. The days leading up to the wedding were tense but productive. True to my word, I ensured that every detail of the venue and catering was perfect. My staff, who had heard rumors of the confrontation, worked with renewed enthusiasm, proud that I had stood up for myself. Victoria Hayes proved to be surprisingly diplomatic once the initial shock had worn off. She had clearly gained a new respect for me after learning about my ownership of the Sapphire properties and witnessing my handling of the situation. "I must apologize for my part in this mess," she told me, as we reviewed the final seating chart. "Had I known who you were from the beginning, I would have never agreed to make that call. You were doing your job based on the information you had," I assured her. "Though in the future, you might want to question clients who ask you to exclude immediate family members while keeping their money." Victoria winced. Lesson learned, believe me. As promised, I received a formal written apology from James and Melissa. James's portion seemed heartfelt and genuinely remorseful. Melissa's contribution was stiff and clearly coached by her father's legal team, but it met the technical requirements of our agreement. The rehearsal dinner held 2 nights before the wedding was my first real test. As I entered the restaurant's private dining room, conversations hushed and all eyes turned to me. I held my head high, wearing a designer dress that struck the perfect balance between elegant and confident. James immediately came to greet me, kissing my cheek and leading me to a seat of honor near the head table. Melissa remained seated, offering only a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. Eleanor Blake made a point of avoiding me entirely, while Howard surprised me by approaching with an unexpected olive branch. "Miss Warren," he said, extending his hand. "I want to personally apologize for the unpleasantness earlier this week. In business, I have always valued directness and integrity. You displayed both, and I respect that." I accepted his handshake. "Thank you, Mr. Blake. I appreciate your understanding." "Howard, please," he insisted. "We are about to be family, after all." Throughout the evening, I noticed James watching Melissa with an increasingly thoughtful expression. She was in full bride mode, accepting compliments and directing conversations with practiced charm. But whenever the attention was elsewhere, her smile would slip and she would whisper sharp instructions to the waitstaff, or shoot irritated glances at guests who failed to follow her conversational lead. After dinner, James found me on the restaurant's terrace, where I had stepped out for a moment of peace. "You look beautiful tonight, Nat," he said, joining me at the railing. "Thank you. It is a lovely evening." He nodded, staring out at the city lights. "Do you remember when we used to sit on the fire escape of Mom's apartment and plan our futures?" I smiled at the memory. "You were going to build skyscrapers, and I was going to own a small bed and breakfast with a garden. Life turned out differently than we expected," he mused. "Better in some ways," I said. "Though I still might get that garden someday." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the first we had shared in months. "I keep thinking about what you said," James finally admitted. "About being true to myself." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I do not know if I am," he said softly. "Everything happened so fast with Melissa. She was beautiful, sophisticated, connected, dating her. Felt like being admitted to an exclusive club I never knew existed. And now?" I prompted gently. He sighed heavily. "Now I am standing on a terrace with my sister, hiding from my own rehearsal dinner, wondering if I am making the biggest mistake of my life." My heart ached for him, but I knew this was his decision to make. "Cold feet are normal before a wedding. This feels like more than cold feet," he confessed. "The way she and her mother treated you? It opened my eyes to things I have been ignoring. The way she speaks to servers when she thinks no one important is watching. The comments she makes about my friends from the construction company. The constant pressure to improve myself by changing everything about who I am. Those are valid concerns," I acknowledged carefully. "But the wedding is in 2 days," he continued, running a hand through his hair. "Everything is paid for. Guests are arriving from all over. Canceling now would be a disaster. More of a disaster than a divorce in a year or 5 years, or 10 years with children involved," I asked softly. Before he could respond, Melissa's voice rang out from the doorway. "There you are. Everyone is asking where you disappeared to." The mask slipped back into place as James turned to his fiancée with a practiced smile. "Just getting some air with Natalie. We will be right in." Melissa's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked between us. "Do not be too long. The Harringtons are about to leave and they came all the way from London." After she retreated inside, James gave me an apologetic look. I should go. Of course, I said, touching his arm gently. But James, whatever you decide, I will support you. That is what real family does. The day of the wedding arrived with perfect June weather. The Sapphire Grand had been transformed into a floral wonderland with white roses and orchids adorning every surface. The ballroom gleamed with candlelight and crystal exactly as Melissa had envisioned. As a family member, rather than just the venue owner, I was seated in the front row for the ceremony. Eleanor Blake made her displeasure known with pointed glares, but Howard nodded respectfully when our eyes met. The music began, and the procession started. James stood at the altar, looking handsome in his tuxedo, but noticeably tense. As the bridal march played, and Melissa appeared at the back of the hall on her father's arm, a collective gasp rose from the guests. She was undeniably stunning in a custom gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. The ceremony proceeded according to plan until the minister reached the pivotal question. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. In the brief silence that followed, James looked directly at me. Our eyes locked, and I saw something shift in his expression. A clarity, a decision, a return to himself. I have something to say, he announced, his voice steady. The crowd murmured in shock. Melissa froze beside him, her bouquet trembling in her grip. James, the minister, prompted uncertainly. I cannot do this, James said loud enough for everyone to hear. Not like this. Not when I am not being true to myself or to the values my sister and I were raised with. Gasps and whispers rippled through the audience. Melissa's face contorted with rage and embarrassment. What are you doing? She hissed. James turned to face her directly. I am sorry, Melissa. You are beautiful and accomplished, and you will make someone very happy someday. But that someone is not me. I have been trying to become someone I am not to fit into your world, and in the process I nearly lost the person who has always been there for me. He looked at me again, and I saw my brother, my real brother, in his eyes once more. This wedding is cancelled, he announced to the stunned crowd. I apologize for the inconvenience, and thank you all for coming. What followed was chaos. Melissa collapsed into her mother's arms, wailing dramatically. Eleanor shouted about lawsuits and ruined reputations. Howard Blake surprisingly remained calm, directing his attention to managing his wife and daughter's reactions rather than threatening James. My brother walked straight to me, took my hand, and led me out of the ballroom away from the uproar. In the quiet of my office, he finally broke down. I cannot believe I just did that, he said, half laughing, half crying. Did you see their faces? I did, I confirmed, handing him a glass of water. That was quite an exit. I am going to pay for it financially and socially, he acknowledged. But the moment the minister asked that question, I knew I could not go through with it. All I could think about was how Melissa and her mother treated you, how they were willing to exclude you while taking your money. And I realized that if I married her, I would be endorsing that behavior. I would be becoming one of them. What will you do now? I asked. He shrugged, looking suddenly lighter despite the circumstances. Go back to my apartment, return to work, start over. It will be embarrassing for a while. But at least I will be living authentically. I squeezed his hand. I am proud of you, James. That took real courage. I learned it from my little sister, he said with a warm smile. The hotel girl who built an empire while staying true to herself. In the following days, James faced the fallout from his decision. The Blakes demanded repayment for their portion of the wedding expenses, which he agreed to handle over time. Some of Melissa's society friends spread unkind rumors about him, but his true friends stood by his side. As for me, I had my brother back, and that was worth more than any business deal or social connection. The Sapphire Grand suffered no lasting damage to its reputation. In fact, Victoria Hayes later told me that my handling of the situation had earned respect in professional circles. Everyone knows the Blakes can be difficult clients, she confided. The fact that you stood your ground while maintaining professionalism has only enhanced your standing. 1 month after the non-wedding, James and I resumed our tradition of Sunday brunches, something we had not done since Melissa entered the picture. As we shared pancakes and coffee, he looked more like himself than he had in years. I got a call from Eleanor Blake yesterday, he mentioned casually. She wanted to let me know that Melissa is dating a hedge fund manager now. Apparently, they met at a charity gala 2 weeks after our wedding was supposed to happen. That was fast, I remarked. James laughed. I am not surprised. I think I was always more of an accessory than a partner to her. The successful contractor with the rugged good looks who could be molded into an acceptable society husband. And now I am dating someone new too, he admitted with a sheepish smile. Remember Sarah from the city planning office? We always got along when I was submitting permits. She called to check on me after hearing about the wedding, and we ended up talking for hours. Sarah is wonderful, I said sincerely. Smart kind, and she values you for who you actually are. That makes all the difference, James agreed. She wants to meet you properly, by the way. I told her all about my amazing sister who saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I would love that, I said, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer sunshine streaming through the window. The wounds caused by Melissa and her family would take time to fully heal, but James and I were rebuilding our bond stronger and wiser than before. Sometimes it takes nearly losing someone to realize how valuable they truly are. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I sat in my office at the Sapphire Grand, reviewing the quarterly financial reports. The hotel chain was thriving with bookings at an all-time high, and a waiting list for elite catering that stretched into the next year. A knock at the door interrupted my concentration. It was Anthony, my hotel manager, with a strange expression on his face. Melissa Blake is in the lobby, he announced. She is asking to speak with you. I set down my pen in surprise. Melissa? Did she say what this is about? No, but she seems different. Less imperial, if you know what I mean. Curiosity got the better of me. Send her up. When Melissa entered my office, I barely recognized her. Gone was the perfectly coiffed society princess with designer clothes and flawless makeup. This Melissa wore simple jeans, a sweater, and minimal cosmetics. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice lacking the entitled edge I remembered. I know this must be unexpected. Please have a seat, I offered, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. What can I do for you? Melissa sat down, folding her hands nervously in her lap. I came to apologize. Properly this time, not with some lawyer-drafted statement. I raised an eyebrow but remained silent, waiting for her to continue. What I did to you was inexcusable, she admitted. Trying to exclude you from James's wedding while keeping your money was not just rude, it was cruel and potentially criminal. I was so caught up in creating the perfect society wedding that I lost sight of basic human decency. What brought on this revelation? I asked, genuinely curious. She sighed. After James left me at the altar, I was angry and humiliated. I blamed everyone but myself. I quickly started dating Curtis, a hedge fund manager. My mother introduced me to thinking I could just replace James and move on. I heard about that, I acknowledged. Curtis proposed after just 6 weeks, Melissa continued. My mother was thrilled. His family has even more money than we do. But then I overheard him talking to his friends about me. Her voice cracked slightly. He said I was high maintenance but good arm candy for client meetings. He said he could train me to be the perfect corporate wife. That sounds painful, I said, feeling an unexpected twinge of sympathy. It was a wake-up call, she admitted. For the first time, I saw myself through someone else's eyes, and I did not like what I saw. I broke off the engagement and started therapy. My mother was furious, but my father supported my decision surprisingly. Howard seemed to have more self-awareness than Eleanor, I observed. Melissa nodded. Dad pulled me aside after the therapy announcement and told me something I will never forget. He said, Melissa, I indulged your mother's social climbing because I thought it made her happy, but it turned her into someone I barely recognize, and now it is doing the same to you. Powerful words, I murmured. It has been a difficult few months of self-examination, she continued. I have had to confront some ugly truths about myself and how I treated people, especially you and James. The therapist helped me see that my behavior stemmed from deep insecurity. Despite all the privilege I grew up with, I never felt good enough on my own merits. I studied her closely, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. To my surprise, I found none. I do not expect forgiveness, Melissa said, meeting my gaze directly. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I am working to become a better person. I appreciate that, I said carefully. Genuine apologies are rare. There is one more thing, she added, reaching into her purse. "This is for you." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $65,000. "Your deposit," she explained. "It should have been returned to you immediately after the wedding was cancelled. It was wrong of me to try to keep it." I stared at the check in surprise. "Thank you. This is unexpected." "It is the right thing to do," she said, simply standing to leave. That is all I wanted to say. "Thank you for seeing me." As she turned to go, I found myself asking, "Have you spoken to James?" She paused at the door. I thought about reaching out, but I decided that would be selfish. He seems happy with Sarah from what I have heard. He deserves that happiness without me complicating things. With that, she was gone, leaving me to ponder the strange encounter. People could change, it seemed, if they were willing to face their mistakes honestly. That evening, I met James and Sarah for dinner at my newest hotel property. They were glowing with happiness, clearly well matched in values and temperament. Sarah was warm, intelligent, and treated the wait staff with genuine kindness, something I noticed immediately. "You will never guess who came to see me today," I told James over dessert. When I recounted Melissa's visit and apology, his eyes widened in disbelief. Melissa Blake admitted she was wrong and returned the money voluntarily. "Are you sure it was really her and not an imposter?" I laughed. "It was her though, a very different version from the woman you almost married." James shook his head in wonder. "People can surprise you, I guess, though I am grateful every day that I did not go through with the wedding." Sarah squeezed his hand affectionately. "So am I selfishly. The whole experience taught me something important," I reflected. For years I defined success by my business achievements. I worked endless hours building the Sapphire brand, sometimes at the expense of personal relationships. I took pride in being self-sufficient, never needing to ask for help. "You have always been the strong one," James agreed. "But strength is not about handling everything alone," I continued. "Real strength is knowing when to stand up for yourself, when to set boundaries, and when to walk away from situations that diminish your worth. If I had not found the courage to confront you and Melissa about the wedding exclusion, I might still be letting people take advantage of my generosity while treating me as less than." "I am sorry I put you in that position," James said quietly. "We both learned from it," I assured him. "And our relationship is stronger for having weathered that storm." In the months that followed, I made changes in both my personal and professional life. I began volunteering with a mentorship program for young women entrepreneurs, sharing not just business advice, but lessons about self-worth and healthy boundaries. My experiences with Melissa and her family had shown me how many people, especially women, struggle with standing up for themselves in both personal and professional contexts. I also reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my workaholic years, finding joy in relationships that had nothing to do with business advantage. James and I instituted a strict no-work talk policy for our Sunday brunches, focusing instead on our lives, dreams, and the simple pleasure of sibling companionship. Perhaps most surprisingly, I developed a cordial relationship with Howard Blake. After Melissa's apology, he reached out to discuss a potential business collaboration. Over lunch, he confided that my handling of the wedding situation had earned his respect. "I built my car dealership empire by recognizing talent and integrity," he told me. "You demonstrated both. Eleanor and Melissa may have wealth and social connections, but you have something more valuable: character." The $65,000 check from Melissa went into a special fund I created to help couples who wanted meaningful weddings without financial strain. The True Love, True Values grant provided venue and catering services at the Sapphire Grand for couples who demonstrated authentic commitment to each other and their communities. As for my brother, he and Sarah became engaged a year after the non-wedding disaster. They planned a simple ceremony in the garden of my newest hotel property, with only close friends and family in attendance. When James asked me to be his best woman, I accepted with tears of joy. On the morning of his wedding, as I helped him straighten his tie, James looked at me with gratitude in his eyes. "You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life," he said. "Not just by stopping the wedding with Melissa, but by reminding me of who I really am and what actually matters. That is what family does," I replied, echoing the words I had spoken during our confrontation a year earlier. "The real kind, not the kind that only values status and appearances." The lesson I learned through that painful experience was profound, true. Self-worth comes not from what you accomplish or who accepts you, but but from honoring your own values and refusing to compromise them for approval or advantage. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no when someone tries to diminish your worth. The path to healing began with that difficult stand, continued through rebuilding authentic connections, and led to a life richer in meaning than I could have imagined. By refusing to accept disrespect, I had not only preserved my dignity, but helped others, including Melissa, confront important truths about themselves. Life offers many tests of character. The wedding that never happened became one of mine, revealing strengths I did not know I possessed, and values I would never again compromise. In standing up for myself, I discovered that self-respect is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships must be built. You cannot control how others treat you, but you always have the power to decide what treatment you will accept. Sometimes saying no is the first step towards saying yes to the life you truly deserve. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when someone tried to take advantage of your generosity? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more life lessons, and share with someone who might need this reminder of their own worth. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your value is not determined by those who fail to see it,